Hello, everyone. Welcome to Geneva, New York. I'm so thrilled that you could all join us today. Geneva this is such a great place to host this event. For those of you who don't know, Geneva really is a hub. It's where our farmers and agribusiness meet up with our research, the expertise at Cornell. We have the Ag Tech Farm here. We have Finger Lakes Viticulture Center here. So it's a great place where all of the players come together to discuss how better can we improve our food, our resources, our delivery, all those items that we're going to be talking about today. So I'm so happy to be here with you, happy to host this event. And for those of you who don't know, my name is Pam Helming. I represent the 54th Senate District. This event today is being hosted by the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources, along with Cornell University, and I want to thank Cornell and Dean Bohr for having us here. Thank you very much. Many of you may know that more than 80% of New York State is made up of rural communities with about 3.3 million residents in 44 rural communities. To address the needs and concerns of these communities, the New York State Legislature established the Legislative Commission on Rural Resources. I'm proud to serve as the chair of this commission. The majority of my district, which extends from the shores of Lake Ontario down through the Finger Lakes region, is predominantly comprised of very rural areas. Access to food is an issue across my 6 counties that I represent. As I'm out and about this summer, I particularly hear concerns about our school-age children and their ability to access food, especially the breakfast and lunch that they typically receive through the schools. That's a real challenge right now. I've also attended a number of senior events where the seniors speak about their difficulties in being able to get out and to access food. But again, I want to introduce and welcome Catherine Bohr, Dean of the College of Ag and Life Sciences at Cornell University. Again, thank you for allowing us to be here. Dean Bohr is extremely well informed on food issues, and I'm excited to hear from her today. Also joining us today are my colleagues from the New York State Senate. We have Senator Fred Akshar here. Senator Akshar is also a member of the commission. Senator O'Mara will be joining us in a few moments. And representing Senator Rich Funke's office is Kevin Knapp. From the Assembly, we have Assemblywoman Barbara Lifton here. Barbara's also a member of the commission, and thank you to all of you for traveling to be here today. Okay. I'd also like to thank and introduce to those of you who don't know her, but I think all of you do. She's done an amazing job reaching out to so many people, is Jill Cassow. Jill is the director of the Commission on Rural Resources. Also with Jill today, we have Caitlin Gilligan, who is our policy analyst for the commission. So Jill, thank you for all of your hard work and efforts organizing this event. And Caitlin, welcome. One more quick introduction. I have with me my Director of Communications, Jonathan Monfletto. Jonathan is here today to take notes and do some great follow-up work. So thank you, Jonathan. And again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us in this concerted effort to address the food access issues in our rural communities. I have a couple of last-minute add-ons. I'm kind of excited to share with you information. Come on down. Senator O'Mara has just joined us. Thank you. But the exciting news I wanted to share is in this year's New York State budget, we were able to secure additional funding for the Farm to School program. This year's budget we have $750,000 for the New York State Farm to School program. This is an increase of over $500,000 from the prior year. So this was a significant achievement, and I thank my colleagues for their support on this. And like I said, this is great for our communities. Another piece of news that you'll be hearing more about within the next, hopefully, week is the Senate bill a bill that was introduced that Jill, myself, and others, we fought hard for, was to expand the current law that allows for exemptions from the formal procurement procedures for schools and agencies. We've been able to expand that and allow those exemptions now for BOCES and counties. This is a huge, tremendous achievement. And again, I want to thank my colleagues in the Senate for their support on this, and also Barbara to the Assembly. This legislation passed both the Senate and the Assembly, and the great news is that it's with the governor, and he is going to be signing the legislation into law tomorrow. So that's an incredible achievement. It ties into what we're talking about today. So I'm pleased to be able to share that with you. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce Dean Bohr to share a few words with us. And for those of you who don't know, Dean Bohr grew up on a dairy farm in Chemung County. Dean Bohr holds a BS in food science from Cornell and an MS in food science from the University of Wisconsin. She has a PhD in microbiology from the University of California. Dean Bohr has a tremendous amount of experience in researching sustainable and safe food supplies, and her research has gained her great recognition by her peers, having received several national awards, including the USDA as well as the New York State Association for Food Protection Awards. As Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, Dean Bohr oversees the second largest college at Cornell and is responsible for leadership of Cornell Cooperative Extensions. At Cornell, she has also established the Food Safety Laboratory and previously served as the director of the Milk Quality Improvement Program. Of course, there are several more accolades for Dean Bohr. The list can go on and on. She has been tremendously successful. But Dean Bohr, I want to welcome you and thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much, Senator, and good morning to everyone. And Senator, you are so right. Geneva is on the move. It is just so delightful to come through the downtown of Geneva and see the growth in food-based entrepreneurship coming into the city. Breweries, new restaurants, new farm-to-table operations. Downtown Geneva has never looked better in my 23 years here at Cornell University. And so I thank you for your continued care and attention to this region of New York State. It shows that we're investing in upstate New York. So I'd like to welcome all of you to Cornell University's New York State Agricultural Experiment Station. And Senator, thank you for your leadership in this area of food access and rural health issues here in New York State. These topics are just so important to everyone in this room, but to everyone who lives in our state. I'd also like to welcome our elected officials who join us here and who travel to be with us here today. We have important conversations to hold this morning, and I'm so glad that you made time to be here with us, and thank you. And naturally, I'd like to thank our expert panel, who you'll be hearing from later this morning. Before I begin my remarks, I'd like to give a special thank you to the Senator today for her work as a first-time Senator, going through our New York State's complicated and evolving state budgetary process. Now, without the Senator's leadership in what I understand were some very late-night discussions this past year, several agricultural research programs that are important for our rural stakeholders wouldn't have been funded. The Senator's tireless advocacy and her willingness to fight for these agricultural research programs was invaluable to our mission of serving our local farm community and the residents of the state of New York. So thank you, Senator, for your excellent leadership on behalf of the state of New York. I appreciate it very much. Now, shifting gears, our topic today is a very high priority also for Cornell, where we believe that access to nutritious food and to a healthy environment are fundamental rights. These beliefs guide the work that we do, and our partnership with New York State and with agencies across the state are critical to achieve these goals. Healthy food access is a long-term challenge. 13% of New Yorkers struggle to have consistent access to healthy food. Over 1 million children in our state go to bed hungry at least once in a while. These statistics are unacceptable, but they're also resolvable. I'm thankful to live in a state where our government and so many agencies and organizations have put a clear and abiding focus on fighting hunger. I'm proud to work with dynamic representatives from across the state on these efforts, first as part of Governor Cuomo's Anti-Hunger Task Force, and now as a member of the New York State Council on Hunger and Food Policy, which was established in 2016. Just as fighting food insecurity, malnutrition, and poverty requires input from diverse sectors across our state, our faculty and our extension specialists work across disciplines, both at Cornell University and with New York and Northeast-based organizations to address these critical issues. Our Farm to School programs are supported by Cornell Cooperative Extension educators who are based in Cornell's Division of Nutritional Science, which spans both the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences and Cornell's College of Human Ecology. This unit is the largest and the oldest academic research and teaching unit devoted to the study of human nutrition in the United States. Outreach efforts through cooperative extension include the Eat Smart New York program for those who receive Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program benefits, that's otherwise known as the SNAP program. This program helps our families to learn about both nutrition and lifestyle changes. For example, learning the benefits of moderating sugary beverage intake so that families can enjoy healthier living. CALS has an academic emphasis, that's the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences, CALS, on offering excellent undergraduate and graduate training programs in nutrition and behavior change, but also a wide range of extension and outreach and research efforts focused on improving people's health outcomes. For example, we have a new concentration for undergraduate students called Plants and Human Health. And this new program was created to address growing interest among our students in the role of plants and the role that they can play in reducing disease and helping prevent disease in the first place. We also see great potential in precision plant breeding. For example, we are creating crops through conventional plant breeding strategies that really help improve human nutrition. So for example, through conventional breeding strategies, we have some now sweet potato varieties that are enhanced in vitamin A. And these are critical new products that help prevent some nutrition-associated problems, really, especially in the developing world. We also have a brand new honey nut squash. This is one that's a little closer to home. And this one has been bred to have a built-in color indicator so that it tells you when it's ripe and when it tastes best and when it has peak nutritional value. So it actually changes from green to kind of a gold, just exactly when you should be eating it, which is kind of not only fun but delicious. And so our research programs are aimed at helping make our food more nutritious, but we also are supporting technologies to help improve food shelf life and to help reduce food waste. We've all heard that 30 to 40% of the food that is grown around the world is lost, in fact, to human consumption. So right here on our Geneva campus, we have new state-of-the-art food processing equipment installed just in this last year that has already been in high demand and in fact has been used to place new food products in our local grocery stores right here in New York State. We're also developing strategies to reduce food waste at the point where foods are processed, such as finding valuable new uses for acid whey, which is a byproduct of making Greek yogurt. And New York State is #1 in Greek yogurt processing, so we've got to find ways to use those byproducts from that manufacturing strategy to keep things environmentally in balance. Now, technologies such as the ones I just described to you matter. And they matter as we continue to enhance the quality and the quantity of our food supply for our New York State residents and beyond. Cornell's faculty and our extension staff are committed to science-based research that leads to healthier food options, that leads to behavioral changes that improve health outcomes, and that help improve access to affordable, nutritious food. There's so much to do, and so many multiple strategies and partnerships that are needed to achieve these ends. And that's why I'm so grateful to Senator Helming for hosting this roundtable this morning and for her commitment to support our efforts to make a real and lasting difference in the lives of hungry people across our state. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dean. Our first presenter this morning is Jan Vink, who is an Extension Associate with the Program on Applied Demographics at Cornell. Jan holds a master's degree in econometrics, and he represents New York with the U.S. Census Bureau on population estimates and projections. He's considered among the very best and the most talented demographers in the state, and he's going to give us a landscape of the current population trends in rural communities, which is a data-based introduction to the population that we're talking about today. Jan?
Thanks for that kind introduction. Welcome to you all. I'm very excited to be here and talk about demographic trends as they currently occur throughout the state. I can talk about it for hours, I'm afraid, and have to stay on a very high level, but hope to introduce you to some trends. I work for the Cornell program on applied demographics. First, I want to explain a little bit what applied demographics is. Applied demographics is a field where we try to come up with methods, demographic methods, and look at demographic data to assist decision makers to make fact-based decisions. If we talk about methods in applied demographics, population estimates and population projections are the main things you can think of. At our program, we work a lot with the Census Bureau. The Census Bureau, biggest supplier of demographic data, and work a lot with the network of data users. A couple of highlights at our work with the Census Bureau are the population estimates and projections. We provide data, we help them with methods. Another field of cooperation is area of cooperation is a state data center network, where we work a lot with data users, expert data users throughout the state. Another area is the Federal Statistical Research Data Center, which gives researchers access to, on very, very strict conditions, to access the individual records that are housed in several federal state offices. And those researchers, by having that access, will help decision makers and will make better enable better policies. Another thing we do, the last but not least area of cooperation with the Census Bureau is the decennial census. The decennial census cannot do without local and state support. It is an essential part of a successful and complete census. So we work with the Census Bureau. We are working with the Census Bureau, with the state, with local governments to make that 2020 census as successful as it can be. We maintain a website where we publish a lot of data, I hope, in a user-friendly way, and invite everybody to take a look at that website if they are looking for demographic data on counties, on school districts, and look at the county profiles we published earlier this year. For the remainder of this talk, dividing New York State in three parts. the greater New York City area, the counties with the bigger cities, and then the remainder of the state. And there is no one definition of rural New York. What is rural? I took this as a kind of a proxy of rural New York, the remainder of state. First, looking at change in total population. New York State, except in the 70s, has been growing, very healthy growth in the 40s, 50s, 60s, but growth has been slowing down, and partly due to loss in population in the greater cities in the 70s, through the 2000s, even in the bigger cities in upstate. But the remainder of state has been growing and growing, has been slowing down, and this decade the Census Bureau estimates that the population is declining, and that is a worrisome trend. If you look at the counties, individual counties, then the darkest brown all lost more than 3% of population since 2010. And you see that it covers a lot of rural New York. Population changes because of births, because of death, and because of people moving in and out. Demographers like to call that the components of change. This chart shows some birth and death rates per 1,000 population. The blue lines are New York City, so you can see a lot more birth and a lot less death in New York City. But in upstate, kind of a similar pattern, but the birth rates have been going down since 2000. And the death rates kind of stayed even, but with the aging of the population, in the near future that line will go up. And most likely those two lines will cross each other not too far in the near future. The difference between birth and death, we call that natural increase. And if those lines cross, then it will be natural decrease. There are already some areas, some counties in New York where the number of deaths exceed the number of births. Those are in the orangey brown colors. Those are all counties where the number of deaths exceed the number of births. The other biggest component of change is domestic migration. People moving between, let's say, the remainder of state with elsewhere in the United States. It can also be the bigger cities in New York, but it can also be in a different state. The green line is the remainder of state. In the beginning of the 2000s, we saw a very brief period where more people moved into the remainder of state that is above the zero line than moved out. But I'm showing net migration here. And that mostly due to people leaving the cities, moving into the remainder. And 9/11 has a lot to do with that. The Great Recession, you saw a big slowdown in people moving around. So in around 2000, there was not that many people. The difference didn't look as bad, but since 2010, people start moving around more, and more people moving out of New York than into New York, and we see that in all the parts of New York. This slide shows a little bit, there are some differences between county in that net out migration. For demographers is also, and for decision makers, certainly for decision makers, it's important to get some insights of people, of the age structure of people moving in and out. What are the age groups that are moving in, are more likely to move in, and what age groups that are more likely to move out? So this chart shows that you see a huge peak of the student age population moving into the remainder of state. Then there are some age groups after the study leaving again. In the 30s, the parents of the young families have a little bit of more people moving in, moving out. And probably also, again, young families leaving the cities, moving into the suburbs and rural parts of New York. Then there is a couple of age groups where there's hardly any difference, same amount of people moving in and moving out. But then past 60, retirement age, people start to move out, more people moving out again than moving in. So this is the age structure that kind of results from those components. The blue line is the census 2010, and the yellow line, orange line is the 2016 estimate. Aging causes that graph to move to the right as people age over time. And you take a moment later in time, it moves to the right. The big bump is the baby boom generation. So that is in the 50s and the young 60s is the peak of the population in upstate New York. And they're reaching that retirement age. The other peak is kind of college age population, but also the millennium generation, which is larger than the generations surrounding it. We just focus on the population age 65. The map shows the fraction of population age 65 and over in each of the counties. Hamilton County is the darkest color, where almost 30%, almost 1 in 3 of the resident population is older than 65. This is, of course, just the permanent residents, not a second homeowners and all those kind of people. Then I wanted to highlight just some other data sources that I think are very useful to know about. One is the county health rankings. They are developed at the University of Wisconsin. This is a ranking of health outcomes where they take things like life expectancy and those kind of things to rank all the counties. And the darkest colors are the counties that rank lowest on health outcomes. They also rank factors that contribute to healthy living, and access to food, I believe, is one of them. But also access to health care, and a lot of those kind of factors are taken into account here. And again, the darkest colors are those counties that score lowest on these factors. The last slide is a slide of data on school districts. We had a program on applied demographics work with a Center for Rural Schools in maintaining a data set on and showing the trends on public school districts. This map shows the percentage of children, of students that are eligible for free and reduced lunch throughout the state, with a dark brown 60% or more of the students in their school districts. So this is the last slide of my presentation. Thanks for your attention.
Our third presenter this morning is Betsy Bin. Betsy holds a BS in zoology, an MS in horticulture, and a PhD in food science. She is director of the Produce Safety Alliance and is intimately involved with assisting growers to meet the Federal Food Safety and Modernization Act requirements. Making sure that our local food meets these requirements is essential to feeding our communities. Welcome, Betsy.
Good morning. So I'm going to give you sort of a high level about food safety. Having access to food is really important. If that food is not safe, that is a problem. So what we're focused on is keeping food safe And I think the other thing that's really important when we think about rural communities is access to food. Creating food options also drives economy. And if one of the things that's problematic in rural areas is lack of economic drivers, and I think fruit and vegetable production as well as other agricultural commodities is a real opportunity for New York State. And so I'd like to talk about that a little bit. Starting with the Produce Safety Alliance as an example, what we're really focused on doing at a national level is helping growers meet the requirements of the Food Safety Modernization Act, specifically the Produce Safety Rule. FSMA has many other rules, but the Produce Safety Alliance is really focused on that. There's a requirement in there that growers who are subject to the rule must receive a standardized training recognized by FDA as adequate. We created that curriculum, and we've been training trainers throughout the country as well as in New York State, and then we are also training growers. To give you a snapshot of what that looks like, keeping this short so there's time for questions, here is where we have been since September of last year. We have a very small team, but we have the top blue graphic of the U.S. is grower trainings. The bottom green graphic is trainers of trainers, and you can see that we've been making serious progress towards getting everybody trained. The Produce Safety Alliance team is very small, but we are located throughout the country. We have extension associates who are Cornell employees spread throughout the country. We have Donna Paul in the Southwest, located in Riverside, California. Kristen Woods, located in Alabama. Don Steckel in Ohio. We have an open position in the Northwest that we're interviewing for. And then we have a cadre of people here in the East. Myself, Michelle Humiston, and Rob Way, also Gretchen Wall, who's now living in Pennsylvania. So this is a small team of people doing outreach to farmers so that they can produce safe fruits and vegetables for our rural communities. But one thing I want to talk about that goes a little bit beyond this and encompasses all of agricultural products, which I think is really important, is the Institute for Food Safety. So the Institute for Food Safety is to be a global leader in research, training, and outreach related to food safety through engagement with farmers, processors, and the food industry as a whole. And that's really important when you think about all of the different agricultural commodities that are out there that drive good nutrition. And I think that's a really important emphasis. This diagram, which I'll just apologize because it's kind of small, but I want to hit on what this means. What this means is that if we're going to do food safety effectively, efficiently, and reach all of our stakeholders, we have to work together in a collaborative way. It isn't just about academics offering training or extension offering training. It's about working with people who produce the food, working with your industry, working with your colleagues who work on plant protection, plant pathology, entomology, working across those expertise to create access to food. If you can't get food out of the field, nobody's going to be able to eat it. And so that's the important point. And as Dean Bohr mentioned about driving through Geneva and seeing all the changes that have happened in Geneva, John Johnson's here from the Ag Tech Park, working with people who are driving innovation, driving companies to come in and to see New York as an opportunity to create new healthy food products. Here at the station, we also have the Food Innovation Center. We have Olga Padilla-Zakor working on new products, talking about people who want to come here and create new products that open up opportunities for good nutrition, access to economic growth. And I think all of that is really important. And the key thing, what we're building on, I think is the important thing here. Cornell has a long history of supporting the industry related to food safety. I talked to you about the Produce Safety Alliance because that's the program I direct. But we have active programs working with processors, working with the dairy industry, a very productive education, extension, research program related to dairy. Dean Bohr, of course, before she became dean, was actively involved in that, and Martin Wiedemann continues that program forward. With the Food Safety Modernization Act, that change brought a lot of changes to the industry as a whole across the entire food system from farm to fork. Sorry, my graphic's a little mundane there. But the point is, all of these industries need help adjusting to the Food Safety Modernization Act. And that's what the Institute for Food Safety is there for. It's a relatively new organization trying to put all these pieces together so that stakeholders know where to come to get services. Here is our website. And Beth Demings, if you'll raise your hand. Beth Demings is the coordinator of the IFS and is in the audience as well. But I look forward to questions. And I hope when I put these slides together, I didn't really know what my co-presenters were going to do. But what I wanted to stress was that having access to food is really important, that food also be safe. Because we don't want those things. When you're talking about fresh fruits and vegetables, those are eaten raw. There's no kill step. We need to make sure everything is safe before it goes to the consumer. Thank you.
Okay, before we open up for questions, what I'd like to do is recognize Warren Brown. Warren is the director of the program on applied demographics, and he has an announcement that he'd like to share with us.
Good morning, all. There is an exciting new data product, perhaps not as exciting as those wonderful berries that we got to enjoy on this site, at least not as tasty, but maybe equally as exciting. The Census Bureau is cooperating with state agencies to combine census surveys with administrative records. One of the premier examples is working with New York State's Office of Temporary and Disability Assistance on their SNAP records. So we know that in census surveys, the underreporting of the receipt of those benefits runs as high as 40%. We don't know what the characteristics of those people who aren't reporting. Why aren't they reporting? Because census surveys are long and cumbersome. That's probably the main reason. But anyway, this combination of administrative records with sample survey data will yield new possibilities for increasingly detailed analysis. At Cornell, we are fortunate enough to have one of a little over 24 federal statistical research data centers, where after a rather rigorous approval process, because the data are highly confidential, there's no personal identifiers after they've combined them, that anyway, you can access those data for research. So if any of you are interested, please talk to me during the break or afterwards. The other thing I would add is that conversations are underway with the New York State Department of Health to put WIC records into this as well, which should yield increasing information about the recipients of those WIC benefits. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Warren.
On the food safety issue, I'm wondering, what are the predominant issues there? Is it about the use of pesticides and other chemicals, or is it more about handling of food? What are the main issues that you are dealing with on food safety?
Okay. The produce safety rule is really focused on microbial issues. You can't hear me? Okay. Can you guys all hear back there? The produce safety rule is really focused on microbial safety issues. So pesticides have always been regulated, not always, but have been regulated for a very long time. What really the Food Safety Modernization Act's produce safety rule is focused on is microbial issues. Your E. coli, your listeria, parasites, cyclospora, viruses such as norovirus. So it's really looking at all the inputs that go into produce: irrigation water, worker handling, worker training, manure applications, soil amendments, those kind of things. We do incorporate pesticides, but because those are already regulated in a different way, it's not really focused on pesticides.
Another food safety, we're going to pick on you, I guess. How do you select or connect with the farmers in that? I know I deal with a multiple of farmers, and probably a lot of them don't have third-party food safety protocol in place yet, and some of them think it's going to be costly. There's a lot of myths out there and all that.
Right.
How do you connect with these people that we can get that done so we can continue to do business with them?
Right. So in New York, I think we're really, really fortunate in that our collaboration with the New York State Department of Ag and Markets and CCE is very, very good. So we have a network of extension folks across the state who all offer programs. We created a multi-day program back in '09, which gives growers a day of basic food safety, and then we help them write a food safety plan. Not every grower needs an audit. And an audit is not a magic bullet. Why would you pay $1,000 to get an audit if you don't need it? What the audit does is open up market access. And so for the growers that need it, we want them to have a plan, so we work with them. We actually did a long-term eval study with Todd Schmidt, Elizabeth Newbold, and Gretchen Wall. We did a survey to actually ask growers, how much does it cost to get this done? And the good news is there is a positive benefit to cost ratio for all size growers. There is an economy of scale, so the smaller grower you are, you don't get as much benefit as the big guy, but there is absolutely a positive benefit to cost, benefit of implementing food safety. So not only do you get the benefit in reduction of food safety risks, you get the benefit of the economics as well. Did that answer the question? Okay.
Arlene Wilson, Yates County Cooperative Extension. I wanted to commend you on your newsletter. I really enjoyed it and was reading it yesterday and mentioned to Jill Cascow the concern around finding volunteer firefighters. I know in Yates County, the village of Dundee is really struggling. Their firefighters are aging out and they're not able to recruit younger members for those key services for rural areas. What are your thoughts on that, and is anything that can be done to encourage and or recruit volunteers for that?
Do we have any volunteer firefighters who are with us today?
Well, I've just, after 2 kids, I'm a less active firefighter, but I am involved in my fire department, and that's actually my boss there. So, in terms of getting volunteers, I see there's a lot of people who kind of view the fire department in negative ways. They view them as kind of like, oh, they're just overboard, and they're just coming to things, and they're really obnoxious with their blue lights. And I really think we need to encourage sort of civil service, and this is a real way for people to help their communities and feel proud about it. And I think we need to celebrate the people who do that job, even though it is obnoxious when they come up behind you, as I've done to people with my blue lights on and block roads and pump out of people's ponds. We need, I think the more we acknowledge the service that people are giving, the more younger generation will want to be involved.
Thank you for those comments. So as I travel around my district, some of the things I hear from the volunteer fire departments are just what you said. It's difficult to recruit members. And when I try to delve down why, what's preventing it, well, I think across the board, it's getting more and more challenging to get volunteers to assist with anything. There are just so many opportunities out there, and we're all so busy and so involved. And one of the challenges facing the volunteer fire departments is the amount of training that's required. And then the access to the training, and there's some cost associated with that. So I think we could continue to look at that and work at that. Also, I know my colleagues and I in the Senate, and I'm sure in the Assembly as well, we meet on a regular basis with Fire Association of New York to try and work with them and figure out how can we help support them. They come to us each year with a list of legislative agenda items, some which are designed to help promote volunteerism. They're looking for support in a number of areas. The cancer presumptive bill, which was passed this year by both the Senate and the Assembly. It's with the governor now. We're waiting for him to take some action on that. So I think we are aware that there's a problem, and from a legislative standpoint, we're doing everything that we can do to support our fire departments. We realize volunteer fire departments are the backbones of our communities, and they do so much more than but then fight fires. I mean, they're there whenever we need them. With the flooding that we've had along Lake Ontario, volunteer firefighters have been there day and night for over a month now. They've helped fill over 1 million sandbags. They've helped neighbors, find places to temporarily house themselves. They've been providing food. They just go so above and beyond, and we need to do everything we can to support our volunteer fire department. And that's one of the reasons why I made the decision to do that feature article, to hopefully draw some attention to the department and to drum up some support. Thank you for the question, and thank you for your service.
I want to just underscore as a demographer the importance of the demographics piece of this. I think it was actually a great idea to start off with demographics as a backdrop because thinking about the demographics as a proxy for community capacity, what our communities look like, how they've changed over time, and what does that mean for your program participants, what does that mean for the economy. For example, Jan did a very good job of showing that, we have an aging issue. Is that an opportunity for these rural areas, or is that a challenge? We have a lot of net out migration, which may lead to a lower level of young educated people in communities. What does that mean for capacity if your economic development strategies are relying on particular composition of the population to be there? What does that mean for food manufacturing opportunities? Is the labor force going to be there? You may have the raw natural assets there, but do you have the people with the skills that you need? So starting with demographics, I know as a demographer oftentimes you get a lot of yawns and checking of cell phones and things, but it's actually a really critical piece to start with about what our capacity is in each of these communities. So thanks, Jan.
Welcome back, everyone. Kicking off this second portion of our presentation is Beth Claypool. Beth is the Executive Director and Ag Issues Leader at Cornell Cooperative Extension of Wayne County. She's a dairy specialist and has worked for CCE for 25 years. Beth holds a BS and an MS and an MBA and is focused on how to better connect the food system from farm to table. Beth is well known for establishing new programs in Wayne County. She's brought apple slicers to all elementary schools, and this successful program has expanded across Western New York and has resulted in research and additional collaborations. Beth is going to speak to us today about federally funded food programs such as Eat Smart New York and SNAP, as well as some of the innovations that she finds promising. So please help me in welcoming Beth.
Thank you, Senator Helming. It's very interesting panels today, and what's really exciting is that in some way, with CCE Wayne, we're involved with all the programs that are being talked about today, which is pretty incredible. One of the things we have is in Wayne County, as the Senator said, we're the regional hub for the Eat Smart New York for the Finger Lakes region. And we have 20 staff working across the Finger Lakes region in nutrition education and improving access. And I guess one of the things I wanted to mention was nutrition education is a huge word. Nutrition education. It's not just about eating carrots instead of cookies. It's about preparing carrots so that it makes it easier to eat. It's about storing carrots to make them safe for consumption. It's about growing carrots so we have enough carrots to feed everybody. It's about the transportation to get the carrots from point A to point B. It's all of that stuff put together, making good food choices with a limited food dollar is what we all consider in terms of nutrition education. What's really exciting about cooperative extension is that we have access to resources that gets to put all those pieces together. I'm also regional office for agriculture. I have 5, 6 agriculture specialists also working out of my office that work all across the Finger Lakes region, in addition to the nutrition courses. And I also have a master gardener coordinator who is very, very talented, and she is working at coordinating what we call champions for all the school and community gardens that we have. Actually, across the region, we have over 26 community gardens. In Wayne County, we have 12 alone, and not all of those are connected with Eat Smart New York. Because one of the challenges with federally funded programs, it's a very limited audience. When we applied for this grant, we had to look at where our educators were going to go based on criteria set by the state and the federal government. And that was a high poverty level and a low health status. So that really limits who we can work with. And we know that there's a lot of need out there. And so one of the things I've also been able to do is we look for additional grant money to supplement the Eat Smart New York grant money and different funding so that we can look at a couple things. Increasing health and healthy activities in communities, increasing access to food, increasing access to education, and really putting that whole thing together in terms of access. And the food systems has probably been my life for like the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years. I could talk about this for hours. Mitch and I have some very interesting conversations about this whole concept. And one of the things that's also very difficult with access is that's just not physical access to food. It's eliminating the barriers. It's eliminating of when are the farmers markets open, because those are when people can shop at them. It's looking at the barriers of which farmers market can accept food stamps and food coupons and WIC coupons and double up and all that. Because the barriers related that are there for the vendors and the market managers, that number of accessibility goes up and down. It fluctuates all the time. I think, Marie, did you just tell me no farmers markets now in Ontario County are accepting food stamps? And that's due to barriers that are associated with the food stamp BBT program. We have that same dilemma in Wayne County, in Lyons. It happens, it doesn't happen. It happens, it doesn't happen. So there's no standardization of even where all the additional coupons and things like that that are available through the states and the feds. There's no standardization of where those can even be accepted. So there's a lot of things that are going on, and we're trying to put them together little by little, piece by piece, through our nutrition education program, working with community members across all specters. So we do education, oh my gosh, in like every organization you can think of across the Finger Lakes. Schools, during school, after school programs, churches, YMCAs, community centers, high-rise apartment buildings, housing complexes. The list goes on and on. We do education in centers, we do education at supermarkets. So we help people look at how they can spend their dollars the best and most efficiently for the healthiest choices. Through some of our other programs, we've also been to work on creating guidelines and a sustainable system outside that education so that the education is reinforced. For example, we've gotten every child care center in Wayne County to adopt a healthy guidelines meeting policy. And I kind of joke about that with the extension in that Wayne County is the #1 apple county in the state, as you all know. We're about the 3rd in the nation. We should have apples at every single meeting that we have, and we don't do that. You know, why? And one of the things we started doing, apples is kind of part of my life too, is the slicer. And so through another grant program, we got apple slicers into all the elementary schools, and we found out just by observing that the consumption went up. Well, that actually makes sense. But then we had a research trial that was done through Cornell. We found that by slicing apples, consumption of apples goes up 70%. So we work with Mitch and those at FoodLink starting to slice apples. And Mitch and FoodLink were actually delivering the sliced apples back to school, but due to access, it's too expensive to do that on a limited basis. So now FoodLink, and I encourage you all to go to FoodLink and see that awesome new kitchen that they have. They're slicing apples and putting them, they're slicing apples, and we're putting apples out through American Fruit and Vegetable to get them to all the schools. I think they're in 40 or 50 school districts now across the state. So there's some really interesting things we can do, little pieces by pieces that sort of feed off the Eat Smart New York money. And I do want to say that Eat Smart New York, there is a fact sheet on here. Okay, and there's 3 main goals. I just wanted to focus on that. 3 main goals of Eat Smart New York. We want to increase the consumption of fruits and vegetables. And it's all sources of fruits and vegetables. It's not just fresh. I mean, we do focus on that for local farms and during the growing season. But frozen is also very healthy for you. Maintaining appropriate caloric balance and physical activity. Working with other sources of funding to get, exercise equipment in different school districts and in different communities. We've also been working on that. And then finally, to reduce the consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages. And we have a huge social marketing campaign going on right now in the Rochester area. Rethink your drink. How many of you have seen those banners on buses or billboards or whatever? That's something that we did. It's a 3-month campaign. And so that's just the piece of reinforcing the message, the access to the information, the access to the ways that people can learn how to eat better and how to get better food. So nutrition is much bigger than just teaching people how to eat apples. And access is much more than having them have physical access to food in a neighborhood. One of the things we've been doing with Mitch and FoodLink is with their mobile pantry. We've been doing education with the Finger Lakes Eat Smart New York program following the mobile pantry around. The dilemma is in rural areas, it's not profitable for them to do it. I'm going to put a plug here. We need more money to fund the mobile markets. because there's just not the quantity of people in rural areas. And I think that's our biggest challenge, Senator. Whenever we work in rural areas, the cost per dollar is much higher per unit of getting access or communication to people than it is in non-rural areas. A couple of years ago, we worked on a grant with Cornell, and we were putting together the budget. And we were putting together the mileage budget. It was like $2,500. And this was for a summer program. And the researcher goes, gee, that's really high. We only have $500. And I said, it's 60 miles round trip to go to this site. You know, so I think just the mileage thing when you run around the neighborhood in rural areas is very extensive. And there's less people per unit. There's physically less people. So it's much harder to reach out to them. You know, it's mail, it's social media, it's word of mouth. There's just a lot more barriers. In Wayne County, we have 6 local papers. There's no single paper that anybody in Wayne County reads, either in physical copy or on electronic copy. Not one paper. So how do you reach an entire community with the same message when you have to go through like 15 different, communication points in order to do that? So I just wanted to say there is a lot of really good stuff we're doing with Eat Smart New York, and by looking at the barriers that we're identifying through Eat Smart New York, we're looking for other sources of funding to help adapt and modify the other barriers so we can get more food to more people and making them better nutritional choices.
Thank you, Beth. As you can tell, Beth is very, very passionate about her job. When she said that she lives apples, she lives the Eat Smart program and working with the farm markers, I'm telling you from firsthand experience, watching her, meeting with her, talking to her, she does. She is very, very committed to helping our communities and to strengthening our communities. And I found that to be true of all the Cornell Cooperative Extension leaders that I've had the pleasure and the honor of working with. Tim Davis is another one. They're just very passionate and so committed, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, because without you rallying the troops and educating me, we wouldn't have what we have. And what we have, like Beth said, it's not enough. We need to do a whole lot more, and that's part of the purpose of this roundtable. So I'm just thrilled that we're having these very candid discussions. So thanks again, Beth. Thank you. Our second speaker is Mitch Gruber. He is the Chief Program Officer at FoodLink, which is a regional food hub and food bank serving 10 counties in Western New York. FoodLink distributes food to a network of human service agencies, and last year delivered nearly 20 million pounds of food. That's incredible. Mitch is going to speak today on the strategies and challenges of regional food distribution. Mitch, welcome.
My name is Mitch Gruber. I'm with FoodLink. We are the regional food bank that's located in Rochester. I also saw Randy back there from the Food Bank of the Southern Tier. So I think it's really important for everyone to know very briefly what food banks do. We are essentially the wholesale entity of the emergency food network. So food pantries, soup kitchens, homeless shelters, those exist in the vast majority of communities that everyone around here represents or lives in. They're in places urban, rural, and suburban. And it's incredibly important to make sure that, and I even see Ann here. Hi, Ann. And so it's incredibly important to know that wherever you are, and Ann runs a food pantry in Waterloo, correct? So it's important to know where your food pantry is, your soup kitchen, your homeless shelter, and be able to connect people to those resources. But FoodLink over the past couple of years has really gone above and beyond in making sure that we are not just looking in the emergency food network for the ways to impact some of the very issues that we're talking about today. So you heard Beth talk about the kitchen we just opened. We prepare about 4,000 hot meals a day, and then in the summer, cold meals per day for after-school programs, for summer meals programs. We're slicing apples based on Beth's recommendation, which was the best thing that anyone has ever told us to do. And our founder, Tom Ferrara, was the type of guy who said, it sounds like a good idea, we'll try it, and this one stuck. So we're now slicing apples for schools all over, and in fact, just had a conversation with New York City schools. And they are desperate to have a New York State sliced apple in their school district. Can you imagine the economic value of getting apples from Wayne County sliced by the folks in our kitchen who we do job training for folks coming out of incarceration, have them slice the apples and ship them down to kids in New York City to eat? I mean, those are true triple wins, triple bottom lines, and we need to figure out how, quite frankly, the state and other institutions like Cornell can help us do this in the nonprofit sector to be able to drive some of these things, because there are still some gaps in the distribution channels. But what I'm here to talk about mostly is not what FoodLink does as a whole, but what we do specifically when it comes to food retail. Because truth be told, everything that Beth said is absolutely true. Everything all the speakers prior said is true. But when you ask a person living in one of the communities that you all represent, what does food access mean? It means, is there a store nearby? That's what it means. Nutrition education is very important. Food safety is very important. I don't minimize that in the slightest. But the question is, where are the retailers? Where are the distributors? And so I'm going to take one quick step back and tell you that personally, in addition to the work I do at FoodLink, I must not have given you the right bio, Jill. That's my bad. I just finished a PhD in history. Very strange PhD to be talking about food access, but it was about the history of food retail. And if you look at trends in food retail over the course of the 20th century, you will see that there was a moment in time where food really was considered a public utility. Rochester has the single, in my mind, the best public market, not a farmer's market, a public market that also includes farmers. I think they have the best market in the country. But certainly in terms of metrics, when you look at number of SNAP transactions, food stamp transactions at a market, they dwarf every other market in the country by a significant margin. That's a public market. Started in 1905 by the state with municipal dollars as well. They sold municipal bonds to come up with the funding to start it. That was how we thought of food retail in 1905. And over the last 112 years, we're now at a point where food retail is squarely in the hands of the private sector. Some would say that's good, some would say that's bad. I happen to work for an organization where our biggest supporter by far is Wegmans, who is not only the best grocer in the country by many, many metrics, but they're also the second or third biggest employer in the city of Rochester. They are a tremendous partner. But they are part of the trends in food retail that you can look at anywhere in the country and say that grocers, big box grocers, are focusing on suburban plazas that have space for a 150,000 square foot store, and not the small little mom and pop stores that used to dot cities like Rochester or more rural communities like here in Ontario County. That's the trend. And when we look at what happened 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago now, and look at the thing that happened with Amazon and Whole Foods, I think it's going to take a lot of people, a lot of guessing to figure out what this is going to look like in 20 years. But it's not going to get better for rural communities. I can assure you that. So when I want to talk about food access, I want to talk about how are we going to get points of distribution into rural centers and into urban centers. And it's going to take some pretty creative thinking, and it's going to take us to move beyond assuming that the private sector is what should be responsible for food distribution and food retail. I will argue, and I'm arguing this as Mitch Gruber, the human being, not the FoodLink employee right now. I would argue all day that food must be a public utility, and we need to think of it the same way we think of education, parks, gas, electric. Those are public utilities, and we ensure that the public sector plays a role in making this available for everyone. So what has FoodLink done to drive this forward? Many things, but the only thing I'll talk about today really is the curbside market, which Beth mentioned. We have a lot of great partners around the room here right now who have seen the curbside market, worked on, volunteered at, and shopped at the curbside market. And all I'm going to show you is a couple pictures and then one more slide that shows some data. But our curbside market is a mobile farmer's market. Okay, on the bottom, you'll see what the outside looks like. It's a box truck. It's an 18-foot box truck that we retrofitted. And this one in particular, we retrofitted to be wheelchair and walker accessible. You can see the shutter windows on the side roll up so people in wheelchairs or walkers can shop on the perimeter. And we load this puppy up with fruits, vegetables, and eggs. That's it. From July through November, it's local. I'd say right now on the truck today, it's probably 95% all coming from local farms. But during the rest of the year, we still run it, getting product from wholesale distributors, the same ones that Beth mentioned that we send our sliced apples through. What you can see on the top is what the inside of the truck looks like. It's truly a market. This is not a charitable enterprise. We are not giving away this produce. We do that as well in other programs with our food pantries. This is a market that goes into communities that otherwise don't have stores. On this vehicle, we accept cash, debit, but most importantly, we accept SNAP benefits. And perhaps even more importantly, we are part of the Double Up Food Bucks program that was talked about briefly before, and we double people's SNAP dollars. That's a partnership with the Field to Fork Network. And we accept FMNP checks because the state recognizes FMNP is the $4 WIC checks for seniors and WIC eligible families, the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which was also talked about briefly. We are going to where these things are being distributed and there are not places to utilize them. Rural communities and urban communities. But let me echo Beth here because I think this is the most important takeaway I'd like anyone to have from this. Beth used the word profitable. I'm going to change that word because we don't seek profit at these places. If we sought, that's actually the problem. When you seek profit in food retail, you only end up with a 150,000 square foot store like Pittsford Wegmans, right? When you seek a break-even point, which is what we're doing, you can do things a whole lot more equitably. But I will tell you, we have to heavily subsidize this program to go out to our rural communities. In the city of Rochester, this thing runs itself. I'll show you some numbers here. These are the numbers that have happened on curbside in the past since we started it in 2013. And you can see last year we cracked $200,000 in revenue going exclusively to low-income communities. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do income verification. You're welcome to be someone who's not low income and shop on this vehicle. Best example I can give you, we go to places like Geneva General Hospital here, and you will see doctors, nurses, patients, and janitors all coming out to shop. It's actually a great thing. It destigmatizes the work that FoodLink does. It brings everyone together. That's what we encourage. But with a focus on low-income populations, you can see, and we had over 22% of our sales were SNAP. That number should continue to rise. But in order to do this program in a place like, not Geneva, because actually Geneva is our second best place to operate these in terms of customers behind Rochester, but to go to Newark with Wayne County Extension, FoodLink, a charitable nonprofit, is subsidizing this every single time we go out. I would respectfully submit that I believe the state, the USDA, they should be subsidizing us going out and forming the stores in the places that otherwise don't have them. So I'm very hopeful. We have a wonderful relationship with our state ag and markets. They are huge supporters of what we do. I think a couple of big low-hanging fruit for the future of this is, number one, figuring out how to get into more low-income rural communities. And number two, I want to transform this from a farmer's market to a WIC store. I want to have a mobile WIC unit so that people can actually utilize their WIC checks when they get them. This is something that I think everyone needs to understand. When you give SNAP, you'll never see people not use their SNAP dollars at the end of the month because you can buy pretty much anything with SNAP. WIC is very, very specific. It is hard to utilize WIC checks. And redemption rates hover around 60, maybe if you're lucky, 70% in different communities. Those are wasted dollars for our most vulnerable communities because the only stores that accept WIC are in suburban plazas. And the people who get WIC to utilize are living in low-income rural and urban communities. How do we as a community fix that? We don't beg and plead for more stores to come open up in rural communities when the business model has already proven it's not going to work. We find creative, innovative solutions. I would suggest that this beautiful truck right here would be one of them, to go right into these communities with the food that's eligible for WIC, and encourage and make sure those redemption rates increase. So that's my story. I'm happy to answer questions at the end, but this is a wonderful event. I'm so happy to have this group of people around the table, because when we get this brain power together, we'll see some real good things happening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mitch. Our final speaker is Todd Fowler. Todd is the food service director for Bloomfield Central School and the Canandaigua City Schools. When Canandaigua is where I happen to be from, and we've had plenty of opportunities to talk. I'm so thankful you're here, Todd. Todd is a leader in the school food service community. He's a member of the board of the New York State School Nutrition Association, and he's a pioneer in the New York State Farm to School program. Importantly, one of Todd's success stories is highlighted in our commission's most recent edition of Rural Features, which I believe everyone has a copy at your seat. One of Todd's local farmers, Len Barron, delivers hand-picked grapes to the school kids during the school day, and the kids, they just eat this up. They just love it. You know, I believe Len pushes the cart around or pushes his buggy around. The kids actually pick the grapes and enjoy them. And just to comment on our Rural Features newsletter, if you don't already receive that, please let us know. We'd like to get you registered for that. We're bumping up the production of the Rural Features newsletter from twice a year to 4 times a year. And I've talked to so many of you here today about possibly being featured in our newsletter. So I'd love to hear back from you, love to follow up with you to make sure that we get that important information and the messages like yours, Mitch, out through our newsletter. But without any further ado, Todd. Thank you.
I always start out with, why farm to school? I first got into child nutrition. I couldn't continue to serve the meals that we were serving then. I'd see children go by the register, as many of you probably have in the past, with a slice of pizza and a carton of milk, and that was it. And that was considered a lunch back in those days. Knowing that most of your vitamins and minerals comes from fruits and vegetables, why that just wouldn't stand up. So we were looking at one of the favorite kid-friendly vegetables was green beans, and I'm looking at that going, well, they'd open a can of green beans, this is according to USDA, they'd put it on the serving line in the morning, and at the end of the day we'd throw that can of green beans away, and there we served a vegetable. And they weren't very popular either. So we started doing a fresh fruit salad and a side salad on pizza day, because on pizza day it's popular, you have pizzas all out, it's hard to have a hot vegetable on that day. So we thought, why not do a side salad? Well, now these kids that are going by the register with a slice of pizza and a carton of milk are going by with a slice of pizza, a carton of milk, fresh fruit salad, and side salad, all raw, fresh fruits and vegetables. It doesn't get any better than that. And that was the impact of Farm to School on what we were doing. Years later, the USDA decided they wanted to help kids eat fruits and vegetables, so they mandated it. And you guys all understand what happens when you tell a middle schooler they have to take a vegetable. So we take a lot of apples or fruit. We take a lot of apples or oranges or bananas and put them out, and they go through the door and into the trash can. Farm to School was doing a lot better at putting fruits and vegetables into not only on the lunch trays for the children, but into their bellies as well. Kids eat with their eyes, and raw, fresh fruits and vegetables, even cooked ones, are inherently attractive, especially when they're food less traveled. So we started trying to figure out even more ways to get fruits and vegetables into our student customers. And I noticed we had a deli line, the kids were trying to make a salad out of some of the deli fixings, and we had considered a salad bar, so we thought maybe it was time. I didn't like the word salad bar because people picture the salad bar of the 70s with potato salad, mac salad, bean salad, tossed salad maybe, and that's not at all what we were doing. So we called it our farmer's market line, and we had choice of greens and 18 to 24 raw fresh fruits and vegetables for the children to choose from, and we served it so it avoided any food safety issues and that sort of thing. And when I did it, I designed it so they could make a salad in the same amount of time they could make a sub. But I kind of shot myself in the foot because it was popular, and I ended up putting a person there, so it cost me a little more in labor, but that was a good problem to have. Administrations change in schools, and it's different. Some of them think, you know, this is a great endeavor, and getting more fruits and vegetables in the kids is very important. Others, maybe it doesn't rate high on priority. So these are some of the barriers that we deal with. And we call them challenges, not problems, and they're just things that we need to solve. So in order to do this and start doing business with local farmers to get this local food on the bar, we realized that one of the official things we had to do was send out this letter that the state education department had designed. And so I had sent that letter out. I went to every place in the district, and I didn't get one response. And so after that, it was a notice of intent to purchase fruits and vegetables. So I went to Cooperative Extension after that, and Cornell Cooperative Extension folks had helped me out and with who the local farmers were that I contacted. Now, until you're a customer, you're not really a customer. And I sat on a lot of panels where everybody talked about how hard farm to school was. I was always the last guy to go, and I'd say, well, farm to school is easy. Find a farmer, buy a tomato. You know, if it's good for you, get two tomorrow. And oversimplifying it, but it really is that easy. And once you become a customer of the farmer, then you really are a customer. So years ago, when we first started this, if I could get strawberries before school was out, I was lucky in the spring. And 3 years in, all of a sudden I could get spinach and asparagus and strawberries and other kinds of greens, and now it's even more because they grow so much more under hoop houses and high tunnels that we're really purchasing as much in the spring as we do in the fall. When it comes to funding in a school, I always, and I would even do this at a board meeting, a lot of people don't realize that the food service department is a separate entity in the school district. It's not funded by the general fund of the school. So even at a board meeting, a lot of times board members either forgot or don't realize it, that we don't get money from the general fund, that we're self-supporting. And our money comes from the dollars that the children spend on their meals and some reimbursement from the state and federal governments. And that's how our programs are funded. We're supposed to be a not-for-profit food service entity within the district. And and so when you're doing that and your funding's limited and you're trying to buy the New York products, sometimes they cost more. When we were looking for more money in our reimbursement from the state, we had posed some of the question to legislators saying, why is Washington State feeding New York kids? And I had a couple legislators talking to me about, well, this big rail car is coming from Washington State here full of apples, but they're saying sooner or later that car's got to go back full of money. And we're going, well, yeah. And so that's the challenges that we're trying to work on now, to have that rail car and the apples all be within New York State. So there's labor issues concerned, with fabricating, raw, fresh farm vegetables. I mean, if you get some muddy squash in nowadays, all the grandmas have retired, and some of the people haven't seen a muddy squash before, and and so there was some training involved. So once we primed the pump to get local food products into the schools, then we realized we had to do some training because some of those grandma skills were lost. So we got more people to do the training and teach our people how to use the foods that they get from the local farmers, along with recipes and ideas and so on. used to be hard ground to plow, but now it seems like when you talk farm to school, everybody's a stakeholder, everybody's all for it, and local food is much more popular. And the kids who at once thought that tomatoes came from Wegmans now realize that they come from one of the local farms. And that's one of the things we do when we have fruits or vegetable purchased from a local farm. We always signify what farm they came from and so on too. It always, especially if the kids are in the district, it always made for a good promotion, and it looks good for our program and for our community. And the school always liked that notoriety too. So when it comes to procurement, every school is different, and every farm is different. So there's not a cookie cutter in how to do farm to school. It required a lot of hand holding, and that's why I'm glad to see gatherings like this, because when we did it in Ontario County and surrounding area, it took a crazy amount of hand holding. But you'd find a farmer in Naples, say, that would deliver to Naples, Honey Eye, Bloomfield, Victor, but you know, he wouldn't go to Geneva. But then you find the farm in Geneva that would do maybe Geneva and Waterloo and maybe even Red Jacket, but he wouldn't do the others. And so when these farmers call and say, I have this or that, you have to know what schools to call and let them know they have that. Try to make those relationships. But the relationships we made over 10 years ago are functioning yet today in a lot of the schools in this region. The local school, Geneva here, does an awful lot with the farms. But it's funny to think that a rural community, which Bloomfield kind of is, when I first came there, big dairy community and all that, and you know, all dairy farmers, and they eat meat and potatoes, right? Well, they were serving mashed potatoes and gravy every day when I went to Bloomfield. And the first time I didn't serve them, I was in trouble with the kids. And I said, well, I'm not serving mashed potatoes and gravy with spaghetti. It's just not done. But they wanted them, and they ate them every day. So we changed them over quickly, and now we serve a lot more. But you will take things like you heard me say asparagus earlier, and I'll bet you there's people in this room that thought kids won't eat that. Well, we try to have that person that thinks kids won't eat that in the dish room that day or something, because even if she doesn't say it, just standing there on the line, kids know, they're perceptive, you know, we need that. And, you know, I mean, I can remember the first time we served asparagus thinking, boy, a nice bowl of that at the end of the day is going to be good, and they were gone. The kids ate them all. So it was a good learning experience for them and for me. There's different things like out on Long Island, they were having an issue. They were trying to get some of the local potatoes into the school, and they were coming to me saying, well, I don't know how they're going to do this, and I can't seem to get, you know, and I'm like, I finally asked the question, who's they? And my colleagues out there say, what do you mean? Well, I mean, they is you got to do that. And one of them took the bull by the horns. She went to one of the large apple farmers out there who aggregated potato farmers there, aggregated all the other potato farmers there. They put potatoes into a 25-pound bag instead of a 50 so that the lunch ladies could handle them, and they marketed them on the whole island through their commodity program, and ended up doing tens of thousands of pounds of potatoes just from that area. And this is just from one colleague saying, oh, I got to do this. And there's a lot of success stories like that, and that's like Senator Helming mentioned the great, we call him the grape guy, and he's in the book. He came to our first farm to school meeting with a price list and what he had. He was like, it really helps to have a food service director champion when you're doing this in a school. It really helps to have farmer champion too. And he was our farmer champion. So he made farm to school easy. If you just let him know you had the interest, he'll call you up on Monday, say, what do you want? And you tell him I'll take this or that. And he shows up on Thursday with it. And, you know, they haven't been picked over 24 hours. It's a wonderful way to prime the pump and get farm to school started. You know, and another thing in schools, it's a busy, crazy atmosphere for a food service director. It's really easy to call the local produce guy and get your produce and be done with it. But, you know, if you make the extra effort, I always have the cooks from each building call me with their produce a day earlier, and so I can shop the farmers. I get what I can from the farmers, and then anything left over I give to the produce guy. And the funny thing is, the produce guy ended up doing more business because the kids were eating more fruits and vegetables, which is what our goal was right from the start. So ours was the health end of fruits and vegetables and local foods, and that's what we were looking for. So the food safety protocol, the USDA thinks that we don't do due diligence for a third-party food safety protocol. Used to be our relationship with the farmer was our food safety protocol, and now they think it's a lot more because it's gotten so much bigger. And those are things people are working on. It was really great to hear what Betsy had to say today. And because some of the smaller local farmers that we deal with are hearing myths and think it's going to be extra costly for them to jump through the hoops for an audit and that sort of thing. And they're saying, well, you know, it's like our grape guy. He's a one-man operation. And so he's like, well, I'm not going to lose money. He says, I didn't plan on retiring yet, but he's worried about it. So we need somebody to do that education piece. And there's organizations like Finesse that comes alongside us. They did their market readiness training and talked to farmers. And there's other, Cooperative Extension does a ton of work in that area. And it's just depleting some of these myths so that, you know, we can get the work done and do business with these farmers, because it's not if third-party audit requirement will come. It's, you know, it's when. And I just hate to take a dozen farmers that I've done business with for almost 20 years, and all of a sudden I can't do business with them anymore. So trying to be ahead of that curve with them. In our state association, we've had an ask for a couple years now that is getting us a little bit of a stir in Albany, and that's we're looking for from the state 25 cents state reimbursement if we spend 25% of our food budget on local foods. Our vision for that, in New York State, we serve 1.7 million meals a day and over 500,000 breakfasts. Can you imagine the impact on New York State economy, on New York State agriculture, if every one of those trays had New York State product on it? So, I mean, it sounds good, and it's not such a far-fetched vision. Just taking the steps, the challenges to get there, you know, are cumbersome. But there's been an awful lot of interest, maybe a couple pilots. You know, I mean, we could do it in 3-4 districts in the state that are maybe agriculture hotspots, and you know, replicate something that we can replicate throughout the state at a later date. But basically getting our student customers to eat more local fruits and vegetables and be knowledgeable about where it came from seems to be you know, not a difficult thing to do. When you put the food before them, they consume it, and you know, and that's the thing. So other than that, I will be here for questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, again, I just want to say thank you very much to our panel. Phenomenal information that has been presented. I think probably like me, many of you, your wheels are turning now. How can we rethink the way we're currently doing things? How can we be more supportive of food access in our rural communities? At this time, I'd like to open up for questions and answers. Is anyone? Yes, sir.
So my question is about the Farm to School initiative more broadly. You've talked a lot about involving children and educating children on eating healthy and proper nutrition, but do any of your programs involve parents or parental education so that they're also eating healthy outside of the school?
There are several like that. I mean, involving the children, there were, you know, a lot of ag in the classroom. There's a lot of information out there, curriculum and all that. When the new learning standards came in, it became difficult to get into precious classroom time is the way they viewed it, where actually garden-based learning or ag-based learning makes a lot of things very easy concepts for the kids to apply some of the things, you know, regarding history, math, and different subjects. As far as in the community goes, I know there's some hot spots, you know, where they've done a lot of things. I mean, we did a couple of harvest dinners where we invited the community in and featured local farms and local meals and that sort of thing. I know in Binghamton area they've done great things in the schools down there. They have an annual function that they do. You know, so it's sporadic. It's not a statewide thing. Yeah.
Thank you.
I would also just add the Eat Smart New York program that Beth runs and that we're one of the administrators of as well in Rochester does a number of programs that involve, like we do Cooking Matters for families classes that involve kids learning to cook with their parents. But, you know, one of the challenges in the schools, I think in general across the board, is about parental engagement. So there's a lot of schools where it's worked well and there's a lot of schools where it's been a challenge.
Okay. Thank you.
I tried to skip my butternut squash story just one time, but I can't. We do an annual thing with second graders where we do Squapple Crisp. And it's basically an apple crisp with butternut squash involved in it. And we make that every year with the second graders, and it's great fun because they'll eat the squash raw. They'll eat it at each stage of the game and realize as the recipe develops, it gets better and better. And they like that. And we send them home with a recipe that they get home for their mom to make. When it comes to parent involvement, the best story I have of that, of an impact, was a mom that called me from Wegmans, and they saw butternut squash in the store, and she's calling me right from the store saying, my son just saw this, and he's all excited about butternut squash. She said, I didn't even know what it was. And he wants to buy it, and he wants to take it home. And she says, honey, mommy doesn't know what to do with that. And he says, Mr. Fowler showed me, you cut it in half, take the seeds out, and bake it. You know, and so she says, so I don't know what to do, but I got a butternut squash, and I don't know what. I said, well, pretty much what your son told you. And I go, if you want to finish it with a little butter and maple syrup, you know, that's great. But we did do that with them, and we did have an environmental club that annually will make different things. One of their favorites is sauerkraut. And it's funny because the kids would never plan on eating the sauerkraut, but what happens is they take it home and let it ferment. It goes in the fridge, and somebody in the family will eat it and all of a sudden say, you made this? This is really good. And next thing you know, the kids are eating it too, and they're coming back and reporting to us that, wow, I'm a hero for this sauerkraut I made, Mr. Fowler. So.
Thank you all for this this really informative panel. My question is for Mitch or for anyone who's talking about difficulty of the cost ratios in working in rural areas, specifically with the food truck, the mobile food truck that you have. Is this just a combination of things? So, for example, if you had a mobile van as opposed to a larger truck, would it be more profitable if you base the truck somewhere else? Is it driving distance? I mean, are there workarounds to that?
I think, unfortunately, probably there are not workarounds to it. So the reason why we're able to run this program effectively is because we have a 120,000 square foot warehouse in Rochester that can aggregate food using some pretty significant economies of scale. So the program necessarily has to leave from there. Otherwise, we're going to end up buying the individual cases of product at basically the same retail prices and not be able to pass those savings on to customers. That's one thing I don't think I mentioned enough. The curbside market is necessarily cost competitive in the market. It has to be. We're not going out there to mark products up. We're going out there to make sure that we can provide someone with produce that is going to be affordable and convenient. So it necessarily has to leave from Rochester. So then you have, as Beth mentioned, the idea of gas and mileage. But on top of that, I then have to personally send staff. These are staffed by paid staff, not by volunteers. So to go out to, yesterday we went to Ovid for one of these events. So we spent 3 hours in a vehicle that were not when we were actually selling product. And then when we go to Ovid, we're serving, 20, 30 people? Whereas we go to a single high-rise in the city of Rochester, we're gonna serve 50 or 60 people, and it took us about six minutes to get there. So that's never gonna change. It's always going to cost more money to run this program in rural areas. I don't see that changing, but I do think we're not gonna go away from it. It's our mission. It's what we have to do. And so if I have to raise dollars and get public support to help subsidize this happening, I don't think that's the end of the world, but I do think it would be really wise and useful for some of the big institutions, funders, and frankly, government and agencies to think about subsidizing this program specifically to go out into the really rural communities. I mean, Ovid is not on a regular schedule. That was something we did because we thought it was the right thing to do to try to get out there once or twice. We serve Allegheny County. It's the only county in New York State that's true Appalachia. It's over 2 hours for us to get to some of the deep sites in Allegheny County from Rochester. We want to do it, and I think other folks do too. So let's figure out how to make it happen.
Hi, I'm Laura Valentine. I work for the Sun and Record, which is one of the Wayne County newspapers. And I just wanted to let you know that it's not really a question. I've been committed to doing a lot of write-ups and articles on food sources and access in Wayne County specifically. I've done some articles on CCE and the FMNP program, and also Curbside Market and the partnership with WIC RV clinics. And I just wanted to make sure that you guys get my card and feel free to use me as an ongoing resource if and when you ever have new programs that you want the word out. So make sure we touch base before this ends. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Ellers. I work at the Cayuga Seneca Community Action Agency. I'm their Director of Food Security. And I just wanted to comment on the panel. You guys have done a great job. FoodLink, I know that you support Seneca County in a great way, and we want to thank you. And the Cooperative Extension, Eat Healthy New York, is a great program as well in Seneca County. First of all, I want to say that the Curbside Market was a great success yesterday, even though you did only serve 20, 25, 30 people. The feedback that I have received was great, and thank you very much for coming out to Ovid. I also wanted to speak a little bit about food recovery and finding different ways of finding resources to help out the food pantries and soup kitchens with their costs as well. We have recently partnered with the Willard Drug Treatment Campus. They have a wonderful farm there, and they are doing a great job supplying the southern part of Seneca County, and now hopefully a little bit more in Waterloo, with fresh produce. And they're wanting to grow. And if we can support that in any way as well, maybe even, partnering up with FoodLink or something along that line, that would be a great thing to do. What we do is we go and we pick up the fresh produce, which had been picked that morning, so it's pretty fresh. Maybe even getting a partnership with their local schools and getting that farm to school idea going. But I just wanted to comment on that and maybe throw some ideas out, because it is a program that I think that has potential, and there's just a lot of work that does need to be done, but it's a great, we're going in the right direction. So I wanted to thank you.
And I'll just comment on it real quick. Thank you for your comments and obviously all the hard work you do. I will say, I just, maybe a lot of the folks in the room don't necessarily know the ins and outs of this, but New York State is just incredibly smart and progressive and generous when it comes to funding emergency food programs. There's very, very, very few states, maybe none other than New York, that actually have a line item in the budget every year that goes to dollars that ultimately go directly to the work that Chris and Ann do at the food pantry level. So that's wonderful, it's important. A few years ago, it almost left as a line item and was almost put into a larger block grant, and the community of food pantries and soup kitchens really advocated, and it's back to a line item, which is wonderful. So it's guaranteed dollars to make sure that there's a real emergency food system. One of the challenges, though, that I didn't get enough chance to talk about here, but you've heard me speak about it before from your perspective, there's so many communities that do not have adequate food pantries and soup kitchens. And I would look right to my neighbor here. Very eastern Wayne County has some of the most significant and serious rural poverty, and there are not the neighborhood organizations, the faith-based communities that can really handle running a food pantry in the same way that a place like a community action program can. And I think that's something that we really have to take into consideration as when we think about rural poverty and rural issues, is that a lot of these places historically have been in the faith-based community. And the numbers in terms of congregations and volunteers are shrinking, the volunteers are aging out. And we have to figure out, again, it's the same thing I was saying about with curbside. We have to think about as a community, how are we going to figure out how to make these places run, not we FoodLink, we everyone here, without having an adequate community action program based in Rose or Wolcott, right? Where's the community action program in Wayne County? Is it in Newark? Lyons. It's in Lyons. So, Lyons and Newark and places like that, they have places that can run good pantries, but Rose and Wolcott, I mean, it's gonna take a lot of work to figure out how to get adequate resources there. And it's not because the state isn't offering the resources, it's because we don't have the organizations there. So we got to think of mobile ways and innovative ways.
I'll just say, we call it like developing champions, and it's got to be a cadre of volunteers. This is volunteers. Even with the Farm to School program, if you read the literature, there's volunteers that work through the PTA that go to the farms and pick up produce and bring them to the schools. It's a cadre of volunteers, and as we heard about before with the fire companies, there's limited volunteers everywhere. And that's the dilemma. And even when you build a single champion or two, that person only has the energy to do that for so many years. So how are you building up your cadre of volunteers behind your heroes, if you will, so that you always have these champions for that specific item forever? That would be the goal.
And just going back to the volunteer comment again, I think if we go back to our very first presenter, Jan, and you look at the demographics, and we can see there how we need to do succession planning based on the facts and figures of, our aging population, who's moving into New York, who's moving out to New York. We need to utilize that information that you presented to help us formulate plans for future securing volunteers, whatever it is. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Glenda Neff. I'm with American Farmland Trust and an initiative called Farm to Institution New York State, which Todd mentioned. We call it FINESSE, Farm to Institution New York State. I also am very happy to see the wide diversity of stakeholders here in health and food and farming and access. And I think what Tom Ferraro championed with FoodLink is something as a model that we could look at with schools and with other distribution supply chains, particularly farm to school, to say where, here is a food bank that's using its trucks and its warehouse, its coolers, its purchasing power, and public money, significant public money, to get food out into areas that have lower access. And there are many ideas of how to do that with farm to school, and also, frankly, with colleges, farm to college. And I want to point out that a lot of colleges now have food pantries on their campus. A lot of students are in food insecure households too. So Farmed Institution New York State is looking at where is all that public money, where is all that infrastructure that really could be used. Long Island used a New York State contract with a New York State owned warehouse with a private distributor, so it was a public-private partnership to get Long Island grown foods to schools. And we really want to look more at how you do that too, use the Office of General Services food contracts more. So Finesse is actually a partnership, so I want to point out that FoodLink, New York School Nutrition Association, Cornell Cooperative Extension, a lot of ag economic development partners are on our leadership team, and that's why we've been talking about this for years. We really want to push in Albany for some of the particular solutions that could be piloted. So pick up a flyer if you haven't seen it of what we are about, and our goal is to actually get public money public institutions spending at least 25% of their food budgets on New York farm-grown foods. And so I want to point out we're focused on farms because we want to get as much a connection to that for the sake of strengthening our whole regional food system. So I want to thank you very much, Senator Helming, for having all of this together today.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no further questions or comments, you have a question? Great.
I have a quick question. And I don't want to kill the momentum because that was a great way to wrap it up. But I'm wondering, thinking about providers and nutrition, is there any partnerships with healthcare providers that you're working on and food systems? And if so, could you share about those?
Is Maggie still here? We are actually starting a pilot project with healthcare providers in terms of having some of their patients being given prescriptions to go out and get fruits and vegetables, and along with that is coupon. We're kind of piloting it to see how it works, because then it's really going to go with FoodLink. That's really part of the whole FoodLink patches, especially with their Double Up Bucks program. But that is something we're doing. We also work very closely with our nutrition stuff, and I think this is really across all counties, with the health departments. I mean, the nutrition, the obesity, the reduction of heart disease, those are all nutritional related programs, and all of the health departments through their, help me out here, WIP, Wayne Health Improvement Program, we call it that in Wayne County, Cooperative Extension and the nutritional entities and the food pantries, they're all part of that. So pretty much all the counties I know in this area are all very active with their health departments and trying to address those very issues and then getting that information out to medical practitioners.
Okay. Assemblywoman Lifton, I just offered, do you want to comment on anything as we wrap up, or you? No, yeah. Yeah.
Ideas. I have lots of questions, but I'll follow up with people. I'm eager to work with you, Senator Helming, on trying to look at some of these core issues and what we can do as a state to better support all the great and interesting work that's going on.
Yeah.
No,
And
thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to add on to it. So the mission today for those of us who serve on the commission was to do just that, to listen and to take notes and to take back to Albany with us what we've heard and what we've learned today and figure out what is the next step. And I truly look forward to continuing the partnership with Dean Bohr and Cornell University. You're such a leader and such a wonderful guiding director, providing us with thoughts and input on how to move forward. To everyone who has participated today, I thank you very much. It's obvious that you're all very passionate about this issue, and I want you to know that on behalf of the commission, my colleagues in the Senate and the Assembly, and the Director of Rural Resources, we are fully committed to continuing this discussion. This was just the first of many. We will be regrouping now, like I said, and figuring out how best to move forward. The information from today's presentations, we will gather that all together, and within the next week or so, that will be on our Rural Resources website. So if there's anything else that anyone would like us to add to that, please just let Jill know. Again, I thank you all so much for your participation today. Thank you.